Very good. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Escalator Showcase 2024. I cannot tell you how much I've been looking forward to this evening. My name is Ellie Reeves. As Programme Officer here at National Centre for Writing, I have the great pleasure of not only coordinating the Escalator Talent Development Programme, but also welcoming you to tonight's showcase event. Whether you're soaking up the atmosphere with us at Dragon Hall or watching via the live stream, I want to thank you for being here to support and celebrate this year's Escalator writers. Escalator is one of NCW's flagship programs, and since 2004, it has supported over 150 writers from the east of England as they begin their writing careers. In recent years, the program has focused on championing fiction writers from across our region's many and diverse communities who are currently underrepresented on UK bookshelves. These writers have stories to tell that are exceptional, engrossing, ambitious, and deeply moving. And through a program of mentorship and development, we aim to strengthen and amplify their voices. This evening, Justine Railton, Kiara Sands, Kizzy Barrow, Amanda Gibbons, Linda Temiano-Vincent, Janet Noland, Kelechi Njuko, and Seema McArdle will be reading extracts from their current fiction project. The words of E.L. Doctorow come to mind. Writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Not only does this perhaps ring true for writing, but it resonates with the unique Escalator journey. We can plan the program to our heart's content, but ultimately and inevitably, Escalator finds its rhythm in the hearts and minds of the writers. This is a journey that will continue long after tonight. You are with us this evening until 8:30 p.m.-ish. We will begin with a keynote address from Escalator alumni and cherished friend of NCW, Megan Bradbury, followed by 4 wonderful readings from our writers. After a brief interval, we'll return to hear from the second half of our writers. I encourage you to stretch your legs in the interval and head downstairs where you can purchase a drink or some much-needed water, as the case will be for me. You may also have noticed the postcard packs that are around the gallery. These postcards contain information and contact details for our Escalator writers and are free to take away with you. Please pick one up if you haven't done so already. I think our comms team sneakily left some on chairs as well, so you may already have been gifted one. We'll conclude our evening in the gallery with a chance to meet the writers, top up your glasses, and enjoy some canapes if I do not get there first. Accessible loos are available on both floors, down the hallway and at the bottom of the stairs. And if you require use of the lift today, please let a member of staff know and they'll be happy to assist. Before I hand over the mic, I would like to extend a brief but heartfelt thank you to this year's mentors, Kate Worsley, Michael Doncor, Yvette Edwards, and Ashley Hickson-Lovance, who have been with the writers every step of the way through the programme. Also, to those who have shared their expertise, Margaret Mayer, Okachukwu Nzelu, Richard Lee, Isabel Ashdown, and I think a special shout-out should be given to our duty manager, Tom Guttridge, who lent not only his advice, but his warmth and encouragement to our writers during their preparations for the showcase. And he's here tonight. I would also, of course, like to thank the funders who have made Escalator 2324 possible. To Arts Council England, Amazon Literary Partnership, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, Garrick Charitable Trust, the Golson Cott Foundation, and the Laura Kinsella Foundation, thank you for your kind support. Escalator is lucky enough to receive additional donations from incredibly generous members of the public. And on behalf of all of us at NCW, I want to express our sincere gratitude for your ongoing generosity. We have a range of prints available for purchase this evening. Sorry, I have to do the comsy bit. The proceeds of which will feed directly back into our ongoing programmes of support for diverse voices on bookshelves. By purchasing a print or making a donation in any other way, you can help ensure that we continue to remove barriers to writing and increase career opportunities for writers with a bloody good story to tell. So if you would like to find out more about supporting our work, you can have a chat with any member of the team, or you can buy a drink, and that also does help to fund us. Now, on to our keynote speaker. I can stand here all night and sing the praises of Escalator, but that will never truly capture the experience of the writers who go through that journey. Megan Bradbury is a British writer, tutor, and mentor, and author of the critically acclaimed novel, Everyone is Watching. Described as a beating heart of a novel by Ali Smith and kaleidoscopic by Emma McBride, the novel was longlisted for the Rathbone Folio Prize and was listed as one of The Guardian's best books of 2016. Bradbury is a graduate of the Creative Writing Prose Masters Programme at the University of East Anglia and has been awarded the Charles Pick Fellowship, an Authors Foundation Award, and numerous grants from Arts Council England. She's written for the Irish Times and the Times Literary Supplement. More personally, Megan was selected for Escalator in 2012 and returned as a mentor in 2020. She now offers long-term intensive mentoring for prose in partnership with us at NCW and has done us the honour of coming this evening to share some words with you. So please join me in welcoming Megan to the stage.
Please excuse me while yes, thank you. While I ask someone to do that. I'm significantly shorter, thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Good evening, everyone. You've already heard from the organiser of Escalator, and in a moment you'll be hearing some of the work written by the exciting writers this programme has supported this year. I would like to speak to you about what Escalator feels like from the writer's perspective, or at least what it meant to me when I won a place on it, specifically about the sorts of opportunities that came my way as a result. Outcomes I did not anticipate then, but which have gone on to influence my life beyond the programme. I won a place on Escalator in 2012. I'd been working on a novel for 3 years by then, a novel that would become my debut, a novel about New York City and some of the important figures who shaped and defined it. I'd been working on the novel in the context that many writers would recognise, fitting in research and writing around multiple jobs and in many settings. Ones chosen for the opportunities they offered my writing. Edinburgh for the access to the National Library of Scotland, Penzance for a rent-free room in my mother-in-law's house. I had by this time completed an MA in creative writing and a writing fellowship at UEA, but still the novel was far from finished. I applied to Escalator to help give me guidance. I wanted someone to talk to about my writing to help me understand it, but I also wanted validation. To know that I wasn't crazy, that this project was worth working on and would lead to something. When I read the news that I'd won a place, I was astonished. I would be mentored by Cathy Unsworth, whose writing is edgy and exciting, and whose commitment to the craft of writing, both as a novelist and journalist, is both inspiring and profound. I met Cathy and my fellow Escalatees on a sunny Saturday afternoon in a building on Princes Street in Norwich, where the National Centre for Writing, or the Writers' Centre Norwich, as it was known then, used for its offices. With a dry throat and butterflies in my stomach, I sat down before Cathy and listened as she told me how she had fought over me in the judges' meeting, that my writing stood out and excited her. And in that moment, I realised the true significance of a statement Chris Gribble had made that morning, that writers need a high degree of self-belief, but every now and then, they need someone else to believe in them too. And that this was what Escalator was all about, a way to show belief in writers in the early stages of their careers, when they had no proof or evidence of their abilities and were moving forwards purely on instinct in pursuit of a dream. Despite possessing an MA in creative writing and a writing fellowship from the best creative writing institution in the country, I was not a confident writer. Indeed, I did not much feel like a writer at all. I wrote, yes, all the time. And by that point, I could describe the themes and ideas that interested me, but I didn't work in the way I assumed other writers did, and this worried me. My initial entry point for a story was via fact and theme, not story and character. I made notes from books and wrote from them, and then cut up the fragments of that writing and began to piece together stories from that. I did not hear, as I had heard other writers describe, the voices of my characters at night. I was never struck by the muse while shopping or doing the washing up. People had even questioned whether I was a fiction writer, interested as I was in the world of fact and history. Why use this material, they said, when you could just invent a story? When I took the first train down to London to meet Kathy, I was nervous. I knew that she had chosen me, and this should have given me confidence, but I told myself that she'd only read a short writing sample, one that I'd worked on to death, and which was not representative of the novel as a whole, which was scrappy, difficult, muddled, and full of facts. What if she didn't like the submission I'd sent her, which contained such a range of styles and characters and New York locations, like I'd cast a net out around the city and pulled the whole place in? I met Kathy in a cafe in Ladbroke Grove. She smiled and gave me a hug. I thought this was a hug of consolation. She's preparing me for the hard truth. Kathy laid out my printed manuscript on the table. I squirmed as I read the title page, New York Novel by Megan Bradbury. Oh God, how ridiculous, I thought, to write my full name like that. I remembered that I used to do this for stories I wrote as a child, a plain typewritten sheet with the title of the story written in capital letters followed by my name. But Kathy was excited. She said the submission was full of energy and ideas, like a collage, she said. She went through the manuscript with me, noting all the parts she liked, underlining phrases and ideas, which, to my surprise, were the parts I was least confident about, the parts where the facts were, written quickly and unself-consciously. This is where the story is, she said. She spoke as if the novel already existed, as if it was real. There was lots of work to do, but with her experience and knowledge, she could see what it could grow to be. And for that hour, and in the hours we met over the next few months, through our discussions, the novel emerged. It would not be a traditional story, it would be something else, and that was fine. That is what is interesting about it, Kathy said. I realise now that Kathy did what any good mentor should do, help the writer to understand what is unique about their own writing, and then support them as they work to bring that uniqueness out. When I work with other writers, I like to refer to Dolly Parton, who has said, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose." The creative process is very much like this. The hardest part can be finding out what a piece of writing is. A program like Escalator, which provides such intelligent, caring, and supportive mentors, as our writers tonight would no doubt testify, facilitates this process. With newly found confidence that came from Escalator, I applied for and won an Arts Council grant, which funded a research trip to the United States. For the first time, I got to visit in person the locations that up to that point I'd only read about. The Escalator Award gave me a status that helped me access resources and interview subjects. I interviewed Robert Mapplethorpe's biographer in her uptown apartment. I was given a guided tour of the Museum of Sex. In the New York Public Library, I handled Robert Moses's business papers and held in my gloved hands a lock of Walt Whitman's hair. From New York City, I traveled to Los Angeles and to the Getty Research Institute, and there I looked at Mapplethorpe's non-editioned prints and held in my hands a fetish necklace that he had made with his. Some of these research activities were planned, chosen for the purpose of enriching my writing, for there is something to be said for touching objects in the real world, things that up to that point I'd only imagined. But a lot of this work was also unexpected. I planned to meet Robert Mapplethorpe's biographer, but did not plan for our conversation to steer away from Mapplethorpe and onto the subject of urban gentrification. This conversation eventually fed other parts of my novel that described the pressures of high rents and inaccessible culture in present-day New York. I planned to visit Robert Mapplethorpe's grave, but I did not plan to get off the bus 5 stops too early and walk for miles through residential Queens and find myself on the wrong side of the cemetery, where I had to then cross a multi-lane arterial highway. This highway, it turned out, was one that Robert Moses, another major character in the novel, had built. I had, through happenstance then, experienced firsthand the effect of being a pedestrian without a vehicle in a car-centric world of suburban New York, and this was helpful. I had planned to visit the Getty Research Institute to access Robert Mapplethorpe's archive, but I did not plan for the Californian landscape or the eccentric man in whose annex I was staying in to linger in my imagination for years, fueling other projects. All these seeds were sown with Escalator. The confidence I found during this program helped me to not only write, finish, and publish my novel, but it had a profound effect on my personal life, providing a handrail of self-esteem and job opportunities during the early years of motherhood, a period of my life, as it is for most, when one's emotional and economic foundations become shaky and uncertain. I was asked to teach for the National Centre for Writing, and later I established a mentoring program with them called The Full Story, which offers long-term support for writers, a role that now enables me to support other writers in the challenging but thrilling task of finding out what their writing is so they can do it on purpose. The Escalator writers here tonight do not need any advice from me. But if I was to pass on an observation about this experience from the privileged position of hindsight, I would assert that this program doesn't end here. Not tonight, not tomorrow, and not in a few months' time. This showcase is a celebration of the work you've already done, but it is also a celebration of new beginnings, of new work, new relationships, and new opportunities that you might not see yet. Like an escalator, this experience moves with you and will keep the momentum going, even when you feel like you're standing still. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Megan. I've already read it once and I'm still getting a little bit teary-eyed. Our writers will be introduced this evening by their Escalator mentors. It's my pleasure to welcome Kate Worsley to the stage to introduce our first writer.
Microphone work? We're all right? We're all right. Yes? Self-conscious? Hello. I can't tell you how glad I am that my mentee, the first of my mentees, Justine Railton, has chosen to go first tonight, because that means I get to go first to enthuse about her. Choosing Justine and her writing for Escalator was for me an absolute no-brainer. Like so many of us, she is a writer for whom life has often got in the way, but she remains a writer through and through. And in many ways, I think she exemplifies what Escalator is all about, giving people whose writing journey has not been easy the massive kickstart that they need and deserve. And her talent is already being recognised. Justine had barely set foot on the Escalator programme before she was accepted onto the UEA Creative Writing MA to make the move from short stories to longer form fiction. Justine has been a joy to work with. She's devoted, she's disciplined, she's pushed her work further than she thought possible, and I think has emerged into a secure identity as a writer that is an absolute joy to see. She has what it takes, and she's proved it, and I hope now she knows it. Her writing is extraordinary, mature, considered, ambitious, wide-ranging. I couldn't be prouder of her and her work, and I'm so happy you get to sample some of it here tonight. Thank you. Welcome, Justine.
Thank you, and thank you for coming this evening. I would like to read for you an excerpt from my short story, Man and Van, which is part of a wider collection. Barry shifted in his seat and tugged at his trousers. He couldn't get comfortable. His neck was stiff and his hips sore from lugging bales around. The machine had been playing up, so he'd pulled and pushed them into place in the vast barn. If one of them fell on you, you'd be dead. An owl swooped down and across the path of the little white van, a flash of browns and talons lowered. On the hunt. Put some music on, Barry. We want to dance. Yeah, come on, Barry. Barry, Barry, Barry. The women chanted his name, and even though he tried to ignore them, he knew it was pointless. These women were relentless, always had been. He remembered the big square of yard, his grey shorts, his knees skimmed and stinging when they had pushed him over, her lips smashed into his bright red cheek. His eyes flicked to the mirror. They were passing a flask between them. Barry didn't have the stomach for spirits. He was a beer drinker and he knew his limits. Not like these women. They were out of control, standing up in the back, singing loud and out of tune. For the love of God, will you all sit down and put those seatbelts on? We'll be having an accident. Rianne's reply was to climb over into the front seat next to Barry, her skirt all pulled up round her waist and her tights and knickers showing. Make yourself decent, woman, Barry growled. Oh, come on, it's just a bit of fun. She put her right hand on Barry's thigh and stroked it while turning the dial on the radio. A disco hit from the 80s blasted into the van. Rianne gyrated in the front passenger seat, no belt on. Barry's calloused hands tightened their grip on the steering wheel. Right, that's it. He jammed on the brakes. He didn't care if they broke their necks. He turned off the engine, leaving the keys in the ignition and the headlights on, which glared out across the hedgerow. He could feel his breath coming fast and uneven. He fell out of his seat and stumbled across the road to stand underneath the big oak. There was a banging in his head. He leant down and sat on the damp grass, his back against the tree. The painful rhythm in his head was matched by the knocking of his heart. What was wrong with these women? What was wrong with himself? He felt the cold damp of the grass seeping through his work trousers. He focused on feeling the trunk of the old tree against his back. It felt sturdy. His breathing started to come slower. His heart felt less constricted. He was all right after all. Barry stood up, a wet patch across his backside. What was he so worried about? It was a bit of harmless fun. These women deserved a night off from the constant demands of their farms, husbands, and children. Didn't he himself enjoy a few pints of a Saturday night with the other men while Bron sat at home alone? Barry's legs felt strong like the trunk of the oak. His heart felt lighter. Rianne and the other women were standing next to the van, a light drizzle dampening their blow-dried hair, eyeing Barry. You all right? Fionn shouted across the lane. I'm fine, don't fuss. Come on, ladies, back into the van, I'll deal with this. Rianne herded the women back towards the sliding side door and turned towards Barry, who hadn't moved from the tree. You get in too, Rianne. Barry gestured towards the van, reluctant to cross the space between them. I just want to help Barry. Rianne tottered on her heels across the road and stood in front of him. He could smell the alcohol on her breath. She stretched her arms up and rested her hands on his wide shoulders. He looked away and saw the other women, all of their eyes on him and Rianne from inside the van. What was she playing at? Come on, Barry, just a little kiss. It's not like we haven't done it before. Rianne, we were 10. We're not kids anymore and you're drunk. She ran her hands over his chest. Look at you, shaking like a child, a big hunk of a man like you. She moved closer to him until he was backed onto the trunk of the tree and pinioned there. Leave off, will you? The closeness of Rianne's body, the smell of alcohol mixed with perfume, and all of the women's faces pressed up against the windows made Barry's heart take up the hammering beat again. He felt sick. Rianne's hands wandered over his body. Barry felt sweat run down his face and gather in the collar of his flannel shirt. It was hot. Why? Why was it so hot? Rianne stood up on tiptoe and moved in for the kiss. Get off, woman! Barry's arm lashed out and shoved her away from him. She fell onto the rough tarmac of the road. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, Ellie, I was waiting for an introduction, but that's okay. Hello, my name's Yvette Edwards. I mentored Chiara Sanders. She was one of my mentees. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about her work. The first 6 words, you all have the postcards. The first 6 words on Chiara's postcard biography are, Chiara Sanders is a young writer. And those words feel very understated to me, lacking in the bells and whistles that should sound whenever her age is spoken of. It continues to be a matter of astonishment to me that Chiara is 21, that she was 20 when this round of Escalator began last year, and at our first mentoring meeting was in possession of a complete manuscript, Write My Name in Water, which she had been working on for the 7 years previous. That alone speaks very eloquently about her passion for writing, for luxuriating and playing around with words and language, and about her self-discipline and capacity to see the process of writing a novel through to the end. Her novel is ambitious and polyphonic, with 6 narrators, 6 points of view, and explores themes of sight, truth, beauty, family, friendship, and home. That she is also an award-winning portrait painter and photographer becomes less of a surprise when you read her writing, which is wonderfully lush and rich in imagery so vivid it literally pops against her pages, and closely observed small detail, finely and sumptuously described. Her next stop will be a BA in Creative Writing and English Literature, which will begin this September at UEA, and which feels like a natural progression, an opportunity to further consolidate her existing and considerable skills. I have no doubt in her capacity to succeed as a novelist, and look forward to seeing her name in lights someday soon. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, please put your hands together for Chiara Sanders.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, I'll be reading an extract from Write My Name in Water, which I've been working on with Yvette, a coming-of-age literary fiction novel exploring themes of identity, connectedness, and what it is to truly see. This scene takes place early on in the novel, when 22-year-old protagonist Michael is at the beach with his old friend Misa. A sensitive, perceptive soul, Michael is already grappling with a recent and shocking diagnosis when this spontaneous trip with Misa adds yet another layer of complication to his life. "So," said Misa, winding a woolen scarf around her neck, multicolored like a maypole, "what made you want to be a pianist when you were young?" She spoke through lips already purpling in the cool coastal air. As we began walking, I set a swift pace. I didn't want her to be cold. "My grandpa," I replied, zipping up my old bomber jacket and inhaling the salted scent of the seaside. This smell, coupled with the sound of a zip running up polyester fabric, brought me straight back to a childhood of camping holidays. We were really close, I said, though he died when I was still quite young. I still miss him. Misa nodded as we walked along the beach. Even through the rubber soles of my boots, I could feel the sand underneath my feet. Every step we made rearranged the surface upon which we walked. Every footfall, a crescendo of sand, a compression of grains. No two steps were the same, and this gentle variety pleased me. Anyway, I continued, thinking back to the hours my grandpa had spent each day at the piano, his hands like fish gliding downstream. He was a pianist, a brilliant one, and he used to let me sit on his lap and play the keys with my fat 5-year-old fingers. Saying this, I looked down at my hands, fingers far more slender now than they had been when I was young, though still less nimble than my grandfather's, which were quick as chopsticks and bendy as steamed bamboo. So, I went on. When I was young and people asked me what I wanted to be, I'd say a pianist. But what I really meant was that I wanted to be like my grandpa. Misa smiled silently, hands swaddled in woolen mittens and almost brushing mine as she swung her arms back and forth, trying to keep up with me. I slowed my pace and continued my story. As I got older, I realized that music wasn't really my thing. It was words that struck a chord with me. But I always wanted to learn just a little bit of piano as a tribute to him. And now, at last, I am. Better late than never. Michael, that's so sweet, said Misa, beaming like the low January sun that skimmed the sea like butter spread quickly over toast. I smiled. It was kind of cool, I suppose. And the strange thing was that I hadn't realized that this was why I was learning piano. I thought I was learning because I had it on the list, but I hadn't stopped to think about why I put it there in the first place. All of a sudden, my hours of slow scales and basic tunes seemed a lot more worthwhile and a lot less tick box. Misa is like an alchemist. She brings out the gold in me. Her skin was pale in the wintry half-light, the color of cashew, as she smiled at me with that gentle, beautiful smile. When we were young, her dark hair flowed long down her back. Now it was bobbed and fringed, framing her face in a way that seemed to make her smile even wider. But she still wore the same pink and red kansashi in her hair. I'd never seen her without it, this intricate expression of the place she called home. In a way, she still dressed like a child, with her knitted mittens and her blue felted coat. But there was an aura of age about her, nonetheless, as if her small stature was a guise behind which lay all the endurance in the world. As we walked along in companionable silence, I felt scared. All of a sudden, I was forced to admit what I had not before. I still loved her. And for all those years apart from her, for all the dates that I've been on, for everything else that had come and gone, I've never loved any girl like I love Misa. I recalled number 3 on my list, left blank and waiting. I couldn't write her name down there. She meant so much more to me than an assignment on a list. But I wanted her, and I wanted to love her, impossible though it was that she would want me now, impossible with the little time I had left as a normal guy, as a viable option. Yes, I love her, but I would not write her name on that list. It would be too real. I could only write it down where no one would see, somewhere that hid the secret as soon as I revealed it, somewhere that would fade as swiftly as my sight. I could only ever write her name in water. You know, Misa began, bringing me back to her side, I think that there is nothing more beautiful I could ever see. As she spoke these words, she was gazing upwards. We'd been walking for a while now, and the daylight was trickling away like sand in an hourglass. In its wake, a sunset had appeared. I watched her watching the fruit bowl colors, nectarine skin and pomegranate seed, melt into the horizon. Nothing more beautiful that I could ever see, she had said, as she looked lovingly at the sky. Yes, I agreed, but I was looking at her. Thank you.
Okay, back again. So, as with Justine, I leapt at the chance to mentor Kizzy Burrows, my second mentee. And I have to say, I felt a strong kinship with her from the start, despite our different lives and styles. She's been a delight to work with, elusive at times, perhaps, but always managing to surprise and delight with some new departure. I hope she doesn't mind if I say she started out with a self-professed wariness of the literary establishment that I found quite understandable. And more than anything, I wanted her time on Escalator to reinforce her belief in herself as the writer she wants to be, not what anyone else thinks she could or should be. I don't want to see her bent out of shape for anybody. And happily, she has been unshakable in her wish to write for her imagination, her people, and no one else. She's described her writing as weird. It's not at all sufficient. It's certainly unique. It's challenging. She has a wickedly sly humour, and it's always absolutely compelling. Kizzy writes from a place that's both strongly intuitive, but also formally highly consciously shaped. So the trick has been to capture this volatile creativity, and build a body of work that's a worthy reflection of her talent. So here is just a taste of what I'm talking about. Kizzy Burrows.
Hello, I'm Kizzy Barrow, and I'm reading an excerpt from my short fiction, Sundogs. Nina hangs her head so that her hair dangles, and the blunt swing of it at the base of her skull is revealed, like the skirt of a mushroom. Brush it through twice, then we'll start, she says. I begin with the ends, though there aren't any tangles. Her hair is insubstantial but rough and feathery from years of bottled bleaching. I lift the brush to her temples, pulling back towards the nape of her neck and feeling the heat of her scalp against my palm. Does it have to be like this? I ask, and I feel her shrug in the almost embrace of our bodies. I want poetry in this moment, to give her something, to move her. I wish I'd met her with flowers or wine or a book. It's always like this, Nina replies, unmoved as she unhooks a string of gold chain from around her neck. Her face is half visible, but pointed away from me in a fixed expression, as I've always known it. She lets the jewellery curl into a pile on the edge of the well, a thin, featureless St. Christopher medallion dangling above the water, and my fingers twitch with an impulse to knock it in, to watch it descend into the darkness. When I picked her up this morning, I thought she was going to invite me in. I stood in the porch waiting for her to answer my knock and looked at the garden. Her house was a single-storey maisonette on the Southgate estate, which had used to be a village in its own right before it was consumed by the expanding residential bounds of the town. There was an unfinished pine border hammered into the ground, a flimsy miniature picket fence type of a thing that you buy by the metre from Home Bargains. It jutted unharmoniously like bad teeth and marked out the late attempts at planting that Nina had done. She must have bought cheap plug plants, already in flower when they came off the shelves, and most of the blooms had faded, leaving just the yellowish, wilting green. Next summer, I thought. Next summer it'll look nice. A candy-striped windmill whirled and caught the sun. Nina opened the front door, and the warm fug of stale cigarettes gusted out. Behind her, I could see the room, which had a set of double doors opening straight onto the garden. She had a round table set up in front of them, 2 folding chairs, an ashtray. I imagined living on the estate, round the corner maybe, coming over with shit wine, with pre-mixed bottles of cocktail that'd leave sticky traces on the table, dragging the chairs out to the garden and playing dance music remembered from our clubbing days. We'd share fags and loose conversation shot with drunk candour in the night as the neighbours watched and gathered in their washing. But Nina had pulled the door shut behind her, jamming her feet into her trainers and crowding me out of the door with the sudden proximity of her body. I thought I felt her looking at me as I drove us out of town, small talk falling dead out of my mouth into a sad little pile that I imagined collecting wetly in my lap. I'd brushed her already smooth hair through to the point where we were generating static. The fine, damaged ends of the cut were lifting away from the rest at the end of each stroke. And I noticed that the skin under her jaw was a little puffy. She had the kind of pale skin with gingerish freckles that must burn very easily in the sun, where every blemish stood out red and raw, and there was a line of too dark foundation marking it out, yellowish in the shadow of her chin. It looked a little like the soft bread dough rolls of the upper back or pudendum, and I felt like a creep for looking at it. I tried to make the brushing last a fair time, as Nina sat under the veil of her hair, looking at nothing. Then I stood up. "We'd better do it," I say. "I won't let it hurt." "But you'd better not," Nina said. "Are you ready?" I arranged her hair behind her ears and tilted her face up to stare into the open June blue sky. "It's a knife," I said. "Is that okay?" I lifted the knife and held it in my hand for a moment. The short blade was beautifully sharp, the smaller Ayagami from a set of 2 in my own kitchen. I used it for herbs, for fine chopping, and I thought it should be a beautiful thing if I was going to set it to Nina's skin. Nina shrugged again, her hands loose at her sides and her head arched back into the heat of the sun. Her eyes, under their closed lids, flicked left-right. I didn't know how to touch her, so I placed a hand lightly on her hot forehead, tender and uncertain as if she were a stranger's child. Without thinking about it, I crooked her head into my elbow and pulled the knife across her throat. I'd never done it this way before, but I knew there had to be enough pressure exerted and in the right places to make it a quick and efficient thing. And I tried to do it like opening a bottle of wine in front of someone, imagining Nina's eyes on me, judging my skill, the confidence in my hands. Her mouth opened wordlessly with a dry clicking noise, and I knew she was already not there. She was away, her body slackening, swimming in the great dark gulf. Thank you.
It's hot, innit? Sweaty. Right, Amanda. Here we go. I'm Ashley Hickson-Lovence. I'm not Amanda, I'm Ashley Hickson-Lovence. About to introduce the lovely Amanda. Amanda Gibbons is a writer from Suffolk. In 2004, gained a BA in writing and media. 17 years later, as a mother and freelance copywriter, she completed an MA in novel writing, graduating with a distinction. Amanda was awarded the Laura Kinsella Foundation Mentorship for Escalator in 2023. Her poetry has been published by the British Council and featured in Lonart Shiro's in Quarantine exhibition. She's currently writing her first novel, The Brilliant, The Spinny, which interweaves 5 women's voices to explore gender, class, community, and commodification in rural England. That's the formal bit done. This is when we start to get a bit, all right, here we go, ready for this, Amanda. No cringing, okay? It has been an utter delight to work with Amanda this year. My first year as an Escalator mentor. From day one, it was clear that she was an immensely talented writer, working on something that just felt so inherently, naturally novelistic from the very, very beginning. It made mentoring her very easy, actually. So it's been a real pleasure to be in this role. Her novel, The Spinny, is twisty and timely, authentically East Anglian, unapologetically so. It's fiery and thrilling, poetic, polyphonic, and powerful. I'm running out of P's here, but it's bloody brilliant. It really is brilliant. I'm glad that Amanda has brought the sunshine from Suffolk today, because when we usually met here in Norwich, it usually poured down with rain every single time. So it's great that we have the weather's fitting for this wonderful occasion. It really has been brilliant to see Amanda grow in confidence as the months have gone on and begin to see herself as the great writer that she is, because she is truly excellent and her novel is brilliant. It is my pleasure to introduce Amanda Gibbons.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello. The Spinney is a contemporary polyphonic novel set in a rural Suffolk village during the spring lockdown of 2020. The novel explores women's voicelessness in rural England, as well as class, community, and commodification by interweaving the stories of 4 women who find a 5th younger woman called Lilith living alone in an old people carrier in the village's wood. In this extract, we follow Sarah as she appeases her suppressed desire for freedom by walking her dog alone and letting him run free. Sarah is a mother who works as a property photographer for a thriving rural estate agency run by her controlling husband, Tom. While the novel is mostly told in the third person, Sarah's threads use the second person to convey her loss of autonomy and sense of self. Sorry, paper's got out of order. You were waiting in the garden with Bartleby on his lead when Tom finally walked in the gate at 4:20. His head was bowed to his phone, which he tapped furiously with one thumb. "I better get going so I'm not late back," you told him, and the tapping hand flicked up to wave you on your way. You crossed the road and disappeared down the shaded footpath between Georgina's wicker fence and Mrs. Fleming's overgrown conifers. If you'd have brought her, your daughter would have stopped to strip a branch of its rust-coloured needles and scattered them in the mud. But you were alone and hurried through, clutching Bartleby's lead. You only slowed your stride when you reached the fields the other side and inhaled a lungful of clear blue sky. You thought of Eliza's squishy toys and imagined it was these you were made of, instead of blood, bone and tissue. Millions of foamy animals filled your arms and legs and stomach, and they were squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, as if by tiny hands, until you made it through the passageway and the horizon opened out. Once you'd passed the backs of gardens, you released Bartleby. He bolted into the field, streaking into the barren spaces where Paul Brown's beans had failed. The day you took the photos of the farmhouse for the auction, Paul's son had been ploughing in these beans with a 19-reg John Deere. A hero conquering nature, his tyres had slipped and slid as the blades of his plough battled through the wet, heavy earth. The conditions couldn't have been worse. October's sunshine gave way to non-stop rain the day the council signed the land over to his father. But time was against them. Their beans must be sown. For all their efforts, you saw the Browns had produced nothing more than a patchy field of blighted plants. "Bring your machines and your chemicals," you heard the universe chuckle, while Bartleby vaulted over the mottled leaves of the stunted crop. "And I'll give you Storms, Kira and Dennis, and we'll see how these beans of yours grow." You had dog treats in your pocket, and Bartleby kept running back for them. "Good boy," you praised him each time. But you got distracted by yellow butterflies, birdsong and blossom. You thought the sugar-white flowers in the hedgerows were hawthorn, then swore at yourself when your phone app recognised them as blackthorn. You were right about the fragile ones on the tree further along, though, which were overrun with bees. Prunus, you remembered correctly, commonly known as bullace or wild plum. Chaffinches flitted around the next thorny shrub. On a branch near the top, a male vibrated with the effort of delivering his song, while a female pecked quietly at a fresh young leaf. You held your phone against a stem of balled-up buds and discovered these were hawthorn flowers, waiting to break open. Then you heard the cackle and flap of a pheasant and realised you hadn't seen Bartleby for a while. "Bartleby," you called, scanning the beans for golden fur, but he wasn't anywhere. "Why the hell did you let him off?" Tom's voice scolded you in your head. He said it every time he found out you'd let Bartleby loose, but he was so happy when he ran. He was so happy when he was free. You thought you heard the awful yipping sound Bartleby made when he wanted to kill something. It sounded like it came from a head near the wood. You paused and listened for it again, but all you could hear was chirps and buzzing and the sounds of your own breath. He was fine, you told yourself as you continued walking. Of course he was fine. He would bound back any second, and you'd still be home in time to have dinner ready for 6:30. Just because he'd never disappeared for more than 10 minutes before didn't mean something terrible had happened. You didn't need to panic. You didn't need to think the worst. Except the yipping had come from the direction of the wood, where pheasants had been reared for shooting, and there were probably traps or snares. Oh God, you thought, picturing Bartleby's neck in a tightening wire noose. Why the hell did you let him off? You broke into a jog, imagining tears coursing down Eliza's face, and Tom telling you over and over to look at what you'd done. His voice haunted you to the corner of the field, where you paused to catch your breath, and saw a plastic sign had been hammered into the ground to the right of the old wooden way marker with the arrow pointing left. "Private land," the new sign said in large white letters,
and underneath, in smaller text, no public right-of-way. Paul must have put it up, you thought. He wouldn't want ramblers imagining they had the right to walk down to the wood on his field margins. The shallow tyre tracks pressed into the grass must have been left there by his Isuzu, either that or a vehicle belonging to the council. Bartleby, here, you called as you took your first hesitant steps to the right past the new plastic sign. If Paul was listening nearby, you needed to sound like a woman who usually kept her dog under control and who, under normal circumstances, would never walk on private land. Bartleby, you called again as you drew closer to the wood. Then, taking care not to step on the bluebells blooming shyly at the wood's edge, you followed the tyre tracks in. Beneath the tangled canopy, slender trees grew in neat uniform lines. Oak trees gathered on the far side, next to a group of something you didn't recognize, while heart-leafed limes dominated the space nearest to you. It was through an alley of these that you continued to follow the tyre tracks, but it was only once you reached the darkness at the centre that you saw the vehicle. Your heart thumped. Dusty black with a clay-cake bull bar, the Mitsubishi was squeezed between two rows of mossy trunks and surrounded by wood anemones. And there, beside a dirty tyre as tall as him, was Bartleby, getting his ear rubbed by a young woman, looking straight at you. "He's here," she said to you, smiling. "He came and found me," and then he seemed to prefer not to go.
Thank you all. I'm back now. We're going to have a short interval so that we can process those 4 readings and maybe grab some time in the garden and get a top-up of refreshments if you would like. So we will come back at, let's say, 1:15, and we will see you then. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome. Great. Okay, we are about to start the second half. As you know, this evening, our writers are being introduced by their mentors. Unfortunately, one of our brilliant mentors, Michael Doncourt, couldn't be here tonight. He's fine. He's in Portugal. He lives in Portugal, so that's even more envy there. But he has been kind enough to record his introductions for his writers for us to share with you. So bear with me a moment while I do technology.
Hello everyone, I am so sorry that I'm not with you celebrating these writers and their fantastic achievements today. I wish I was there having a little glass of Prosecco and having a bit of a laugh and just reflecting on what a fantastic year it's been. I am, however, still, by the magic of technology, able to introduce my wonderful mentees, the first of which is Linda. Linda is a really special writer, and I fell in love with her work from the very first page of the submission that she sent in. She is able to combine an incredible kind of warmth with a very stinging investigation of really important pressing social matters, from poverty, class to gender to identity, all set within a Nigerian context. So Linda Temenior Vincent is a writer based in Norwich whose work explores the complexity of family relationships. In 2021, she was awarded the UEA Global Voices Scholarship for Prose Fiction, and she completed an MA in Creative Writing from the University of East Anglia in 2022. I am absolutely delighted to be able to hand over now to Linda.
Hello. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So this is a joke from Michael. Michael once said, "You know how I like my endings, Linda. You know how I like my endings." Thank you, Michael. I do know how you like your endings. Okay, so I'm reading from my novel, How to Marry a Rich Man. It is a vernacular novel, so it's not in very pure English. It's a contemporary drama with a strong heroine set in Nigeria. It has elements of women's fiction entwined with romance. The themes center on identity, family dynamics, and female empowerment. It is inspired by my late grandmother, and I was very, very honored to experience some of the scenes in the book with her, just like Megan said. This is the opening chapter. In this morning of the Monday, that serious day of business, the sun is shining hot. I am standing in the under of my big umbrella in the side of the Sapler Road and frying akara in the pot that is in the top of the firewood. I am looking the plenty man, the plenty woman as they are going their walk. I see one man holding his daughter, and he is going to school with her. The child stop and drag her father's hand to bend down. He nearly falling with her bag in the ground. As he opening his mouth to shout for her, he see that her buckle her free. He helping her to fix it, and them continuing. I starting to be thinking that she have lucky because she have father. Different horn of plenty car is blowing from traffic, and shouting noise of music starting to be coming from inside the bus garage in the other side of the road. I doesn't know whether the ear of the plenty driver and their bus conductor that is inside this garage doesn't pain in them. Because how people go be playing plenty music that is sounding like confusion and be louding it like this every day? Why have the passengers not complaining? Even me that is in the far of the garage, I can be hearing. The vulcanizer that have near me, his mouth is moving up and down because of chewing stick. Him son that have finished secondary school help him to be dragging the tire pumping generator near the road. The vulcanizer remove him green overall from him bag and fling it to straight before he starting to wear it. And the smelling of armpits that never see soap water plus petrol smoke blow come to my side and it fit keep person. So I block my nose quick. How him customers managing to breathe, only God knew. I hiss and remove the vulcanizer smelling problem from my head and continuing to be turning the akara in the oil. In the deep of my heart, I liken how the vulcanizer and him family be. Him wife is a teacher in the school their son go, and you no go ever knowing that the vulcanizer get problem because of how him wife and son used to covering and respecting him. But my mother doesn't cover us. If people look for our trouble or abusing us or her, she go be bending her head down and be saying we should be leaving it for God to be punishing them. She go be talking that it is cow that have tail that fits to dry fly. How cow tail and fly concern our life, I doesn't understand. But if anything want to happen to her business or her money, or if me and my sisters angering her, it is that time her strength go come outside and her voice go strong. As I packing the akara from the oil, the vulcanizer wave him thin hand to be greeting me. I shake my head for him. I never hearing him talk since I selling food in this road with my mother. The first time I asking my mother, what do him? She talk, miracle, shut up your mouth and be minding your business. But later, it is my sisters Monica and Margaret that telling me they have heard people in the sapler talk that it is so they born him. The only one day I hearing sound coming from this man's mouth is the day one motorcycle man with Bob Marley hair come and repairing him tire. I doesn't know what happened, but before I fit talk Jack Robinson, the motorcycle man give the vulcanizer uppercut in him jaw and him face turned to one side, but him neck returned him face to be looking the motorcycle man. The motorcycle man tightened the shirt of the vulcanizer for him neck, dragging him anyhow like paper that breeze is blowing. In that day, the vulcanizer spit scatter and blood in the floor. He make one kind sound in his mouth, and the sun run come from their small kiosk. As he seeing blood in his father's mouth, power rush inside his hands, and he turned the motorcycle man face to boxer face. They doing wrestling, tearing shirts, and their body rolling in the sand. Frustrate and abuse plus shoes flying everywhere. Sapler crowd come and separating them and be judging their matter. After, the vulcanizer's son helped him father to hang one signboard for the electric pole. He have write in the sign, vulcanizer here, patching one hole 200, 2 holes 350, pumping tire 500, no argument, no change, no abeg. Since then, I swearing in my heart that Monica and Margaret must be going university. I no go allow anybody to oppress in our family. Hey, brother, sister, buy sweet akara here, soft bread, you know buying. I smiling and calling people that are passing go. Some of the men have wear shirt and trouser and tie. I liken the shoes of some of the women going their work. Some black, some high, some low. It cover all their feet, and they have looked like important people. I look my 2 legs inside the rubber slippers I have wear. The toenails have grown, and it be like chicken that have trekked for sand in the 3 days. It is vexing me, because I doesn't get time to cut the nails. If that I get free money, I will be buying shoe too and be looking like important seller. Hot akara here, I continuing. Some stop and buy, some just looking me. Their throat is crawling to the akara, but their pocket is talking no, and them going. Some do like soldier that is marching go front and doesn't hear come or go. My mouth just talking, and I carry the spoon to stir the blendy mix of the beans. But my hands shake, oil pour, and the fire starting to crack. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm getting the hang of the ropes now. I'm going to introduce my second mentee, Janet Noland. Janet Noland is a writer who has worked for many years in education and is based in Cambridgeshire. She is interested in poetic prose and the immersive nature of storytelling. Over the course of this Escalator programme, she has been working on a series of short stories which centre women's experiences, often common, ordinary, everyday experiences, viewed through a window and perspective that undoes the reader's expectations in a way that is both discombobulating and thrilling. Her short stories explore hidden voices and the narratives that weave between the natural world, man-made world, and the complexities of the human mind. Her female characters are real, complex, flawed, and frequently unreliable narrators, characters who challenge existing societal depictions of what women, wives, and mothers are supposed to be like, and she does so in writing that creates an immersive experience for her readers. Janet has a passion for running with her dogs in the fens, where she gains much inspiration for her work and which contributes to her ability to evoke landscape and the natural environment in a way that is absorbing, vividly detailed and atmospheric. Everyone, can we please give a warm welcome to Janet Noland?
Thank you, Yvette. It's been an absolute privilege to work with you. I'm going to read a piece from one of my short stories. Outside the kitchen window, the sky lifted up and out. Hot curls of cloud drifting silent in a piercing sky. She took a deep breath. From the gaps around the crumbling window frame, the sharpness of winter oozed metal in the air. She felt the downy hairs on her arm rise. The pane of glass reached wide and white. The kitchen taps sprinkled light in rivulets across the counter. In the corner of the window, just above the left tap, a single leaf was pulling and flapping, half attached to the window pane. One edge seared fiercely against the icy glass, the other rolling out to face the sky and the soft winter sun. Its auburn colour was preserved perfectly, with lines of silver etched across the hardened veins and around its crisp outline. It was laced all along the perimeter, each ragged fold and bump delicately jewelled. Apart from at the far edge, where the light warmth had begun to melt the frosty glue. The colour was richer here, darker, the wetness of melting ice releasing hues of autumn as the leaf flapped erratically and reached up towards the expanding pink and grey of the silt-marled sandy sky. And that's when it happened. A whisper of lightness, just a flicker, pulsing up like the sap deep within the arms of the twisted oak tree in the garden beyond. Latent life budding from dormancy. A connection, flooding her sugar-starved veins. The packet, once lifeless on the table, was up in the air, spinning itself towards the ceiling and the metal light fitting above. She watched, stomach clenched, as it curved, sliding up towards the eaves, skimming past the dusty wooden beams, then turning and falling, gravity-pulled towards the ground. As it passed the wrought iron light fitting, the edge of the flimsy wrapper caught on its heavy bar. A strip ripped deftly, slicing along the length of the packet, and her eyebrows raised as a cloud of pink and white flakes puffed out and spewed forth, cascading themselves in a decadent flurry across the room, soft powder falling and spraying and swirling in glorious spinning release. It was over in a second, and as she stood, sprinkled in the pink powdery snowstorm, fine, nutritious dust still floating and drifting and breathing in the pale winter sunlight, a shift broke across her troubled face. She was smiling now, then laughing, then hunched up in a ball, howling, fists clenched, screaming. The pink dust frosted the floor, the bench, the windows, and the side of the door. Even a few specks blew onto the mantelpiece on the far wall. Look at how much it covers, she thought to herself helplessly, the synthetic scent of strawberries spitting fire on her breath. Just look at how much it covers. The bright eyes of her daughter smiled back from her portrait on the mantel, dancing dark eyes bursting out through the film of dust, chubby cheeks soft and smooth. She wiped it off to see her more clearly, kissed the wide brow of the photograph, and pulled it tight in an embrace. My baby, she whispered, curling her arms around herself, clutching the piece of cardboard tightly to her chest. Tears spilling silently down her face and turning the dust into pink goo, slippery and wet on her skin. She stood there for a long time, years folding into minutes, into hours, into just that space. And she placed the ragged picture down. Across the pink powdered floor, the tracks of her feet were dark and softly curved. The tree in the garden, a grey silhouette. The kettle was singing as it pushed bulging wads of blue steam into the air, tiny beads of warmth hissing and swirling and chasing across the silently empty space. She turned to regard the scene for a moment. The worktops scattered with dust, the gritty floor, the tattered paper strips still lying diced across the table, before pouring out the scalding water for a cup of tea and a biscuit.
Me again. I'm delighted to now introduce to you Kelechi Njoku. Kelechi is a special writer, a very learned writer who reads really widely and is very ambitious for himself. His prose has a deceptive quietness about it. Beneath this very still surface, there is a flickering, very sharp wit at work, which I absolutely loved. So you're in for a real treat. Kelechi Njoku is a fiction writer and editor from Nigeria and a graduate of the MA in Creative Writing at the University of East Anglia. In 2022, he was the inaugural fellow of the Raja Inoji Editorial Fellowship with A Longhouse magazine. In 2020, he was the writer-in-residence at Blackrock in Senegal, and he has been shortlisted for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize and previously won the Writerism Short Story Prize West Africa region. His writing appears in Ada, Litro, Brittle Paper, and This is Africa. Delighted to hand over now to Kelechi.
Hi. All right. Good evening, everyone. So I will be reading from my short story titled Room for Two. It's a bit of a drama. It's about two characters, Charlie and Neddy. So Charlie is a little educated gay man married to a lesbian, and so they are in a mixed orientation marriage to sort of escape society's homophobia. And so that's not all the problem that they have. They also want children, and that's just not happening. So this is them visiting a doctor to figure out why they can't have children, and then the conversation that ensues. So, room for two. They listened to the doctor repeat himself regarding what to do with the 4-inch long plastic bottle. They nodded, they understood, and had no questions or anything significant to say. They would get him the sperm sample this week. As they stepped out of the cloud of disinfectant and medicine smells into the 11 a.m. sun outside the hospital, Charlie asked Neddy to hand over the car keys he wanted to drive. Neddy hesitated, stopping herself just in time from asking, "Are you sure?" Not like he was an invalid or anything, but the job of who to drive the one Audi they owned had never been an issue. If Charlie picked the keys from the dressing table first, then Charlie drove them to their destination and back. And if Neddy got hold of the keys first, then she was the day's driver. She dropped the keys in his waiting palm without a word. At the same time, she wanted to let him know that based on the things she'd read, that plastic bottle in his pocket was only the start. There would be several more visits like this to the hospital, more tests and more questions that would make them squirm and swallow uncomfortably. Charlie should be prepared, not sulk. They would have the children they wanted eventually, she believed, but for now, he could drive if he wanted, if it made him feel better. It did make Charlie feel better, driving. Throughout the 30 minutes with the doctor, he had lost all sense of who he was, felt like a counterfeit version of himself. His entire life, he had never been more aware of his penis. In his mind, he'd seen the doctor poking between his legs with a stick, questioning the authenticity of the organ there. And Charlie had felt dead. "I like it when you're silly," Neddy laughed when he told her some days later how he'd felt with the doctor. Charlie shook his head. She thought he was joking. Imagine. Look at him, the white in his hair multiplied every day. Look at her cheeks, which used to be firm and pointing forward, now sagged. So what made her laugh? But he forgave her ill humor because the fights hadn't been frequent then. In fact, they'd been gossiping about Sister Favor from church, who had invited them to a miracle crusade to see a pastor of hers who opened wombs. "It's going to be a power-packed encounter," Sister Favor had declared. "That sounds stifling," Neddy said to Charlie, losing herself in her mirth, unable to, and unwilling as well, to forget how Sister Favor had looked with a big Bible pressed to her breasts as she stated how she saw no reason why Charlie and Neddy should miss the crusade. "Stop laughing, Nne," Charlie pleaded, but she laughed harder. "I'm sorry," Neddy said now, the hospital far behind them. Charlie grunted. He knew what she meant, that she was apologizing for going to see the doctor weeks before today without talking to him first. But he wasn't sure he was annoyed about that. What did it affect, after all? He shrugged, even though Neddy couldn't excuse her own actions. Yes, she'd had her reasons. She had wanted to have a head start in dealing with the outcome of what she knew was an inevitable trip to the doctor. She had feared before the doctor handed her the results of the CCT and HSG that she had the problem. That day, weeks ago, every strength in her hands had collapsed in relief as she held the results that confirmed that her eggs were fine, her tubes were fine, she was fine. She left the doctor's office that day thinking strangely of Charlie's mother, Mama. The woman was okay. She made excellent abacha, better than Neddy did, and although Neddy reached for every excuse not to be in Mama's company for more than 15 minutes because Mama was one of those people who remarked on everything they saw, Neddy still preferred that she and her mother-in-law maintain their friendship, even if from its current distance. She did not need the uncomfortable intimacy that could arise with Mama checking on her and Charlie every few weeks, wondering what could be wrong, if they slept together at all. She was tired of Mama asking her, "Where are my babies?" Thank you.
Thank Thank you. Seema. Wow. Complete breath of fresh air, both in terms of her writing and just as a person. Best epitomised, a few weeks ago, we had our final mentor meeting in Bread Sauce on Upper St. Giles Street, a favourite haunt of ours, delicious pastries, right? And I was in a bad mood, I was a bit ill, I was a bit tired, and I saw Seema, and within 10 minutes, I felt so much better. She mentored me about how to live my life, and that just epitomises the sort of ray of sunshine that is Seema. Seema McArdle is a working-class Punjabi, born in Newcastle into a Punjabi family, now living here in Norwich. Her work explores fascinating British people of colour, many of whom remain excluded from our history and storybooks. Her first fiction manuscript won the Publishers' Prize at Fab Prize 2020 and was shortlisted for Penguins Right Now 2021. After securing a development grant from Arts Council England, she wrote the first book in her Sarah Parker and Joe Butler Investigate series. Seema's writing is fun, fast-paced, informative, and important. From day one, I have been blown away by her unwavering enthusiasm, her energy, her raised fist fight for what's right, championing the people and characters who, for too long, have been marginalized and forgotten about on the page and in society generally. So integral is her passion for others. I myself, being the skinny twig that I am, have been treated to a few generous portions of her unfathomably delicious Ghanaian curries on more than one occasion. They're still talked about in our house even now. Her project, The Golden Goblet, is a middle-grade time-slip adventure featuring a British Asian girl, a white working-class boy, and Henry VIII's black trumpeter, John Blank. Her words fizz from line to line, page to page, chapter to chapter. Undoubtedly, I can see this book being devoured. See what I did there? Food, yeah? Devoured in schools across the country once it will be published. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Seema McArdle.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for that, Ashley. I don't even know how to top that in any way. I will just read my bit. Following the apparent death of her beloved Granny P, Sarah Parker inherits a surprising £84 million and a house. There, she and best friend Joe Butler find a letter in a chest filled with labelled artefacts. As the letter and labels are written in a code devised by Granny P and Sarah, she begins decoding the letter while Joe attempts to decode a label attached to a golden goblet. Sarah turned to Joe open-mouthed. She'd already decoded the first paragraph and couldn't believe it. "What's up?" "Wait till you hear this," she said, her voice trembling. "Dear Sarah, first and foremost, please read this letter before decoding any labels. I'm writing this before I leave for Egypt, and if you are reading it, then, I'm sorry to say, I'm no longer with you. But this doesn't mean I'm dead. Not quite, anyway. I promised you an adventure, and I'm now offering you the adventure of a lifetime that I insist you accept. You see, your grandpa and I belong to a secret historical society that time travels, and we're hoping you and Joe will join us. But it must remain a secret, and I know this sounds fantastical, but let me explain." "Blimey," said Joe, "she must have been pulling your leg, right? I thought you said your grandpa died last year." Sarah was stunned. It really was too fantastical, yet she wanted to believe it with all her heart. "Let me check I've decoded it right and do the rest of the letter," she said. "There's loads." He nodded, and they continued decoding in silence. But halfway through her letter, with her mouth hanging open, Sarah looked at Joe, shaking her head. It was ridiculously unbelievable, but why on earth had Granny P invented such a huge lie? To give Sarah some excitement and distract her from Granny P's death, perhaps? "What?" said Joe. "I've decoded mine and checked it 3 times because it's well weird, like a clue. Listen." "No,
No, you need to hear my letter first, said Sarah, but I'm only halfway through. Jo tutted. Mine's only short, Bossy Boots. Listen. Wait, said Sarah, her fingers grasping and tugging at the goblet. She had to stop Jo saying the words on the goblet's label while he was holding it. You don't understand. Give it to me first. Don't say the words. But Jo was having none of it and talked over her. Find and stop the poisoner to save 2 innocent lives. As the last word left Jo's lips, a cold air swished across the attic. He gave Sarah his bug-eyed look, and she stared back, terrified, as a blinding white light perforated the air with a huge bang. Jo in the attic had disappeared, while the floor sucked Sarah's body like water down a plug hole. She tried to scream as she fell deeper and faster until a black void swallowed her whole. Chapter 3. Being John Blank. Raucous shouting and laughter jolted Sarah awake as a weird mixture of roast chicken, candle wax, and sweat assaulted her nostrils. Blinking rapidly, she tried to make sense of it all, questions tumbling through her mind. Who were all these people dressed in weird costumes? A far cry from the hoodies, jeans, and baseball caps she usually wore. Wasn't she just in the attic with Jo? Where was he? And why on earth was someone shaking her arm and calling John? Her head hurt, but she focused on the person shaking her. A young man with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a blue shirt that looked like a dress, with a yellow belt and yellow trousers. Maybe she was at a fancy dress party, but how did she get here? And why was he looking so worried? He seemed to be calling her John, unless he was calling for John to come and help her stand. She decided to reassure him and pushed herself up. I'm okay, she said, her voice sounding far too deep. She coughed to clear her throat, although it didn't feel so. Her body felt heavier too, and when she stood, she was much taller than usual. Catching a glimpse of her hand, she yelped. What the? She said, trying to comprehend what she was looking at. A dark brown man's hand. In fact, as she inspected herself some more, she realized her whole body was a man's body. Patting it tentatively, in horror, she noticed she was wearing the same funny costume worn by the man who'd called her John. It was thick and stuffy, increasing her sense of claustrophobia. She took a few deep breaths. This had to be the most realistic dream she'd ever had. There was no other explanation. Or was there? Something flicked through her mind, but she couldn't quite grasp it. John, how do you feel? Are you okay? Said the young man, peering into Sarah's eyes, concern etched all over his face. Blinking rapidly, she focused on the scene around her, more alert now. She appeared to be in a grand hall with colourful tapestries covering its walls. String instruments played in the background as the crowd's chatter filled the stuffy air. They looked super rich, wearing bright taffeta and satin costumes, embroidered with lace neck ruffs and wrist cuffs. Strings of pearls, golden girdles, colourful jewels, and gold accessorized the women's outfits. Even the young people were dressed funny. Where were their T-shirts, combat trousers, and Air Force trainers? Deciding that it had to be a realistic dream about stuff she'd read about, she asked the man, okay, just tell me, who are you and where are we? What? Do you honestly not remember, John? He said, rubbing his forehead and eyeing her with concern. I don't understand what happened. We were just walking and then you collapsed. Although I cannot say how or why. Me neither, she muttered. Seriously though, who am I, who are you, and where are we? He sighed. You are John, and I'm Peter, your best friend, thank you very much. We're both royal trumpeters in Greenwich Palace, and if you don't pull yourself together, this is going to look bad, not just for you, but for all of us. He sounded very upset, and it all seemed far too real. Suddenly, the memory of what she'd read on the first page of Granny P's letter flooded back. Then Jo had read that goblet's label, something about a poisoner and 2 murders. Her hands flew to her cheeks as she scanned the crowded room. Oh, no. No. This can't be happening. I must find Jo. Thank you. I just want to say, as I'm the last reader of the night, on behalf of all the writers who took part in this year's Escalator programme, Thank you to the National Centre for Writing and its sponsors for giving us a platform. Thank you, Ellie Reeves, for your continued support throughout the year. And thank you to our amazing mentors who chose our work on blind submissions, who gave us their encouragement and their wisdom. Thank you. And also, finally, thank you to friends and family who supported us. Couldn't have done it without you either. Thank you. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm only going to be here for a few seconds. Thank you so much, Seema, and all of tonight's writers as well, for your wonderful readings. One more time, can we hear it up for the Escalator Cohort 2024? Amazing. If anyone is wondering, this is John on here. Seema asked that we show you him. That brings us to the end of tonight's readings and live stream. So thank you to everyone for being here tonight to support and celebrate the writers. We're incredibly proud of them, if you couldn't tell. They really are writers to watch out for, and they will have our continued support throughout their journeys. For those of you in the room with us, I'd like to invite you to join us in the gallery or perhaps the garden for some canapes and refreshments and a chance to meet the writers if you haven't already. And for those of you joining on the live stream, thank you for watching and good night.